And I'm now joined by Krysten Peek of Yahoo Sports to give you a little NBA special draft episode ahead of Wednesday's NBA draft. Krysten, thank you for making the time and joining us in what is a very busy week for you.
Yes. It's the best time of the year. It's my Christmas morning on Wednesday, the first night of the NBA draft. And I've said this before. It's like I spend all year, all season, all couple years leading up to this, getting to know these players, scouting them, and then it's like you're cramming for the rest of you, you're cramming for a final exam. It's midnight right before you're going to have to know everything. And so I'm here to help. I'm here to educate as much as possible with just a couple days to go to the draft.
Yeah, and we absolutely need it. And for people who aren't familiar with Krysten's work, you can find her words written on yahoosports.com, or you can find her on the Ball Don't Lie Yahoo Sports podcast feed, where you've got your weekly podcast, which you do to cover the draft there. So that's where you can go find Krysten's work, and I highly recommend it. And I've got good news for you, Krysten. You're a first-time guest on the podcast, and we seem to have this knack where we bring on draft analysts and they get massive promotions after they come on. So we had DJ Marcassini got hired by the Sixers, Matt Penny hired by an NBA agency, Adam Spinella also hired by the Sixers, and Jeremy Woo hired by ESPN. So congratulations on your promotion, wherever it's going to be. You've earned it.
I don't know if I might be the outlier in this clause. I've been at Yahoo for 16 years, so I don't know if I'll be leaving anytime soon. But yeah, that is a fantastic track record you got going there. This is like a lucky charm. I'm Absolutely. Happy to be on.
We're going to test the rule with you then, if you've been at Yahoo Sports for 16 years. Okay, let's move on. In your latest mock that dropped today on yahoosports.com, you had the Hornets selecting Matas Buelis. It was an interesting mock because in your mock, both Steph Castle, Reed Shepard had already been selected, who are kind of the most obvious players tied to Charlotte. My question is, why did you have Matas over other guys like Cody Williams, Devin Carter, maybe Dalton Connect, who's kind of been linked to the Hornets publicly? What made you choose Matas in that spot?
So the thing that's going to be very interesting, and I think the draft is going to probably start at 5, because if Donovan Clinton doesn't go number 1, then teams are going to be looking at his fit, and he doesn't fit at 2 with Washington, definitely doesn't fit at 3 with Houston. He didn't even work out for them, or 4 with the Spurs, where you're hearing this little late round buzz of, oh, you could have the Twin Towers in San Antonio. I don't see that happening with Donovan and Wemby teaming up. So at 5 is where things get interesting. And if you are the Detroit Pistons and you have Donovan Clinton still on the board, I think they want Modest. I think that's their target. That's who they want to draft. But if you are there to entertain sort of discussions around Donovan Clinton, with teams like Portland at 7 or Memphis at 9, who are targeting those front court players, I think that's where the draft starts. Now at 6, if you are the Hornets and Modest is there, he would be a fine piece. I think he's more of a stretch 4. We saw, how seamlessly Brandon Miller slid into the backcourt and how productive he was in his first year. I think Modest has that same sort of trajectory as a floor spacer and also a rim protector defensively. I mean, he's 6'10", he can put the ball on the floor. So when you're looking at teams, I mean, we just saw a team, the Boston Celtics, win playing 5 out. So I don't necessarily think that the Hornets have to take a guard at 6. I think they're going to weigh all options. And Cody Williams, Modest, great options at the wing. I think Dalton Connect, also another great option at 6. But it's all going to be dependent on what Detroit does at 5.
Interesting. And like I say, it'll be interesting to see if Klingon does indeed go on, or I think the Hornets are another team who've been rumored in terms of trading back if Klingon is there, and Detroit just stuck with Matas. So that's also on the cards as well. This year is obviously a change because Charlotte have a new ownership, a changing and evolving front office kind of as the draft cycle has gone on. We know in the past they were a franchise who reported to really previously kind of highly value workouts. I think a lot of listeners are curious. Have like the people you see attending games and doing the circuit, are they the same people you're seeing from the Hornets of last year? Or have you already started to see that changeover happen as the season's gone? Or is that, you think, going to happen after this cycle?
I think it's going to happen after this cycle. I love that they brought in Jeff Peterson. I know him very well. He did excellent work at the Brooklyn Nets. So I think he's going to be the one to kind of change the franchise and the way that they draft and the way that they scout and try to build a championship caliber team in Charlotte, or at least a playoff contention, So it's finding those tricky pieces that just kind of put it together like a puzzle. We have to remember that the Thunder, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the Detroit Pistons both started their rebuild at the same time. Sam Presti, again, like just a genius on the draft board, kind of an over scouter, just decided to draft all these different pieces. He got a superstar in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He drafted a unicorn in Chet Holmgren. And then what did he do? He just went out and got long 6'6" plus playmakers, defensive machines that can keep teams guessing. And I think that's the trend that we're going to start seeing the NBA take, and not necessarily what we've seen in the past, where you have specific positions with a point guard, a shooting guard, a small forward, a power forward, and a center. I think it's going to become more positionalist as we go on.
I think we've already seen that in Charlotte. I mean, Brandon Miller last year played shooting guard and small forward. Steve Clifford actually said towards the end of the year he thinks shooting guard could be his best position, which I think is maybe something that a lot of people view down and say the Hornets have a gap at shooting guard. When actually, like, the way they might see it, they're looking for more like size. Because if you have Brandon Miller at the 2 at 6'9", LaMelo Ball at the 1 at 6'8", you've got the potential there to have a really super long lineup, which will give you, like say, that switchability, that size and skill, which everyone seems to be going for now.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move into our Q&A aspect of this. I asked some Hornets fans for questions. We got some good ones. First one from McDuffie fan. How real are the rumors that Charlotte is looking to trade up?
I don't think that, I mean, listen, you never know what's going to happen in this draft. I think they're sitting pretty at 6. I don't think that there's someone in the top 5 that they are like, we absolutely need to have this person, unless it is Steph Castle. Steph Castle might be their guy. That's who they want. That's who they see sliding in alongside Brandon Miller and LaMelo. And that's who they want to go get. I don't think he'll be there at 6. So if there was a player to trade up for, I could see it being Steph Castle.
Interesting. And a question from @British_Buzz, which is me, because no one asked this question. What do you anticipate in a weak draft the cost being to moving up? So if that was Houston at 3 and the Hornets were moving up, I think in years past we saw it as a first round pick was like to move up from 3 to 1 in the Tatum Fultz draft. Like that's generally viewed, I think it was a first round pick for the Trae Young Luka swap. Do you anticipate that cost to be a little bit lower in this draft where there's a bit more of a flat talent level?
I don't think so, because we all know what's coming up in the next 2 years in terms of the draft talent. So if there are teams that have assets in the first round of next year or the following year, I think they're going to be trying to utilize and try to swap or trade for that. I don't think anybody, it's not just going to be a player swap like we saw last year with Cason Wallace and Derek Lively.
Yeah.
I think they're going to have to give something up if you find value in trading up in this draft, just because, like you said it, I mean, it is a weaker draft and that sort of scenario. But also, if you're the other team, you got to say, okay, but listen, if you really want this player, what are you going to give us? Like, if this is your guy and he's going to be there for us at 3, what can you give us that's going to be equally beneficial in either the Cooper Flag, Ace Bailey draft or the following year with AJ DeBonsa and Cameron Boozer?
Okay. Next one, in a tub, would you, strange handle, I know, would you bet more on Steph Castle shooting improving to like 35% on medium volume, or Connect's defense getting to an NBA average level for a wing?
I would bet all day on Steph Castle. I think we look at the things that NBA teams and executives value the most in terms of draft prospects, and it's youth, length, and upside. And Dalton Connect, I mean, he's got the clock working against him. And I love that he like chased a team like Tennessee when he entered the transfer portal. He chose the Vols over North Carolina and Kansas because he knew he had to work on his foot speed. He knew he had to work on his switches. He knew he had to work on his physicality. And to his point, he was intentional about that. And he did get better. Do I think there is significantly more upside for Steph to become more of a productive shooter from 3-point range? Absolutely, because time is on his side. Dalton, we know what he is as an athlete. I think, you kind of got a smaller window for him being a, reliable defender in the NBA.
I was doing some prep the other day about Patrick Williams because the Hornets got linked with him, and he's like 9 months younger than Dalton Connect.
Yeah.
And he's been in the NBA for 4 years now. It was mind-boggling. Those things just like when you see those, even though like they make sense, they still just twist your mind in knots when you see that. It doesn't seem fair that you can compare a player like that who's been in college for so long versus the NBA, but it's interesting. Okay, next up, this is from Andy Neal. Will the Miles Bridges decision affect how Charlotte approached the draft?
I don't think so. I mean, right now you're looking at it and you're just trying to add pieces, like I said, to the puzzle. So I don't think Miles Bridges, I mean, of course they have to look at everything and they have to do their due diligence, but I don't think it will affect their decision at 6. I think they're more looking at what other teams are going to do, and they have their 5 players or whatever on a draft board. And it's just kind of like, okay, looking at different scenarios. If this team takes this, is it possible to do this? And that's the biggest impact I see in this draft.
Okay. And last question here, second to last, sorry, Jason Bourne. Do you think the Hornets have a strong preference between Reed Shepard and Steph Castle?
I don't know. I think they would absolutely take Reed Shepard if he was there. He's not going to be there. I think if anybody, he's kind of been a lock as a top 5. I think with Reed, he was one of the best shooters in college basketball, shooting over 52% on 3.5 attempts per game coming off the bench. He does have that upside, but he's also smaller. He's 6'2". Steph Castle, 6'5". And, that size and length, especially defensively, where Reed kind of falls off a little bit, really helps you in a team. And so just having that extra length, I think, helps Steph. But Reed is one of those, he's like a chameleon. And he said this to me before going to Kentucky. I said, how are you going to work with a backcourt that has so many stars and that, they need the ball in their hands to be proactive offensively? And he said, I will literally do whatever is asked of me. If Coach Cal says, I want you shooting threes, I'll shoot threes. If he says, I want you on the bench getting water for my teammates during timeouts, I'll do that. I will literally do whatever's asked of me and whatever it's going to take to win. And I think with like also his high IQ, and he led the SEC in steals, which was, you stop and you look at that. You're like, he's not necessarily as big of a liability on defense as Rob Dillingham, but there are some concerns there. And I think he's just going to be like a really good role player, glue guy in the NBA.
I don't think I've heard anyone talk about this with Reed Shepard. Like his high school background, like he was a relatively unheralded recruit. I don't want to say he was a nobody, but he wasn't a guy who I think a lot of people were talking about coming into the year. Where do you see, what has he done this year to vault him to the top of the draft? Like, did people think he was just an okay shooter and he's now an otherworldly one? Did people think he was terrible on defense and he showed that he's got some instincts on that end? Where do you see like the areas of growth for him from high school to now?
I would say I didn't realize that he had such a high IQ, and his decision-making off the dribble and off the PNR was significantly better than what we saw in high school. Okay. I think in high school, there was a game right before going into his senior year where it was in Las Vegas and his AAU team was playing against Bronny James. Rob Dillingham was on that team. I think there were 3 other, 4 or 5-star players. And Reed and his, small little Kentucky town team came in and just torched them, torched them. So I think that was when I think people, first of all, in the high school space were like, oh, okay, we need to pay more attention to this guy. And that's probably when Calipari was like, yes, look who we scored coming in. Because like I said, he is that glue guy. He was fine coming off the bench. He's not that overly egotistical player. So he can come into his situation in Houston with a lot of personalities or anywhere and just kind of fit right in. So I think that's what is most intriguing about Reed. You just know exactly what you're getting from him. And in a draft with so much uncertainty, it's like the perfect situation for him.
And you've got the Hornets, which I think are a team that are in uncertainty, right? And he is, like I've talked about this, he seems to be the perfect guy kind of straddling the line of, well, if LaMelo stays long-term, he could probably play enough with him. And if he goes, then maybe you can turn the team over to him to be your lead ball handler. Like, you can straddle that line. If you take Rob Dillingham, it's like, well, who are you giving the ball to, right? And Reed Shepard, you don't have to have that same conversation. So, like you say, that flexibility and adaptability to the situation could be a good fit in Charlotte. Okay, last question here. If you had $100 to bet across any draft prospects for who the Hornets would select at 6, how would you split it up? You can do, 3 players, $33 each. I'll leave it up to you. So how would you split it in terms of who you think they will end up with after the draft?
I'll go 33, 33, 30. The first one, I'll go Donovan Clinton. Like, if it just goes straight chalk and he ends up falling, I think that is a no-brainer pickup. Then I'll go Cody Williams, the wing out of Colorado, who kind of shows glimpses of a budding Jaden McDaniels with how well he defends the perimeter. And he's way farther along at this stage of his career than his brother Jalen Williams was, who's going to be a max contract guy, I think, for the Thunder. And the third one, I guess I'll go Dalton Connect, just because I was talking to an agent yesterday, and they asked, where do I have Dalton mock to? And I said 9 to Memphis. And he told me, he's like, oh, I think he's gone before then. So just these little, like, you're trying to figure out the smoke, read the smoke 2 days before the draft. Yes. Yeah, but those are my 3.
And I think, like, 2 of those names, Clingan and Cody Williams, aren't probably names that I think listeners of the podcast would have maybe been expecting to be in there. So I presume, obviously, in that scenario, Shepard, Steph Castle, everyone like that, you're presuming they've gone in the top 5.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Okay, well, on to last couple of questions just on the second round. The Hornets hold the 42nd pick. The question is, like, do you think that is a two-way slot in this year's draft, or do you think that's a guaranteed contract? Like, it kind of seems to be around there where you shift from being guaranteed multi-year contracts to two-way guys. What do you anticipate that sort of range being value-wise?
I think it all depends on the player and also the agent and how good they are at negotiating and how much the Hornets or whatever team really wants that player at 42. But historically speaking, I think that is a two-way contract when you're looking at, the back half of the second round in that 42 range. But this year's draft, I feel like we are going to look back probably 4 or 5 years from now and look at a lot of guys in this draft and be like, whoa, he was drafted where? So when we're looking at the second round, I'm kind of glad that it's a 2-day draft, because it's really going to give people, just the education they need. We're not going to see Nikola Jokic drafted during a Taco Bell commercial. It's going to give them the attention that they deserve. They're making the NBA and they should get their moment, but it's also going to carry over from the first night, where there are probably players that have green room invites that are going to have to wait till the second night to hear their name called. So just the uncertainty, but there is a lot of value, I think, in the second round this year, and especially at 42, kind of being in that mid first round range, for them to get, a productive 3-4 year player out of college that can come in and contribute right away.
Well, you very well segued into my last question here. Every year there are guys who are projected late first round who end up dropping. Leonard Miller, Maxwell Lewis, D'Anthony Melton. That's a throwback a little while ago there. Who do you think are the guys this year who are projected late first on most of the mocks and could just slip, not for any particular reason, or maybe they could slip down to that 42nd range? Everyone loves a steal in the second round, right? And if you get a guy who's projected in the first, in the second, then you win the draft according to draft analysts, and that's how it works. So people want to know.
I don't know if, this player, the back half of the season wasn't necessarily a first round pick, but towards the beginning of the year, Kevin McCullough Jr. from Kansas, the 4-year guard, was one of the best scorers in college basketball. He became the number 1 option on offense between him and Hunter Dickinson. And, then he, of course, had the knee injury. He showed up to the combine. He was on crutches, had his knee scoped, no structural damage, but still met with teams. And so I feel like that's going to put a lot of teams off him because of the knee surgery. But there is value when you go back and look at his film and how productive he is. If he does fall to the 40s, you're getting a potential first round talent for nothing, in the 40s, if you're Charlotte. Another player that I am more higher on, but I've seen him kind of slip to that 40 to 45 range or 35 to 45 range is Dylan Jones out of Weber State. 6'6", walking triple double, very smart player. Was really worked on his body. So he's another option where I think you could get a lot of value out of him. That's going to have a very long NBA career. But like I said, there's always going to be a guy. You want a front court player. Adem Bona out of UCLA is, I think, becoming one of the biggest sleepers in this draft. And he's kind of projected in that range. So there's the second night. It's going to be fun.
I love it as a second night. I know it kind of split people across the NBA. I mean, firstly, for someone who does content and has to write and talk about these things, just gives you a chance to like get your breath. And also for me, the second round used to finish around 5:30 a.m. So I'm definitely a fan of the 2-day draft here, and the early start on the second day, which I know is also very unpopular in the US. Like it starts at 8 p.m. my time. I'm absolutely winning. I don't know who's going to watch it in America at 3 p.m. Eastern. But I'm a big fan, so it's worked out well for me. Kevin McCullough is a guy I had like in the first round. The only issue, and you talked about the injuries, right? And that's the only reason he's kind of got bumped down, because there seems to be a little bit of concern there. But like I say, if he is able to fight through that, and just like if you evaluated on the talent, he's clearly a first round pick. So that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, so some other very interesting names there. Dylan Jones, South Carolina from originally, so close to Charlotte would be bringing him home. That could be another popular pick. The Hornets always end up, I think Bryce McGowan's the South Carolina guy. They like to bring in people from in and around the area, as we all know over the years. Okay, Krysten, that is everything I have for you. Thank you so much. Good luck. Get some sleep if you can. And I hope you enjoy the draft.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Go Hornets.
Absolutely. And just a reminder, people can find Krysten's work on Yahoo Sports or on the Ball Don't Lie podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever else you find them. Krysten, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.